Slam here today with a different kind of video. Lately, I've been getting annoyed with the current progression style of the big first-person shooter titles like Call of Duty and Battlefield. So I decided to make a video explaining in detail where I think the developers are going wrong with their designing, and as a result, why I think Black Ops 2 is going to fail. Just like Modern Warfare 2 and the first Black Ops did once the new game buzz wore off. And is also what I said would happen with Modern Warfare 3, that people seem to be agreeing with me now on the whole part, but didn't agree with me before it was released. I just want to make it clear, this is not a video listing of the things I hate in each series. It is the sum of my opinion on why I feel these titles are becoming more about random matches, requiring less skill to be the victor, like you would find in a normal competitive game. And for this video, I am defining skill as the ability to anticipate, outsmart, and capable of doing good with an original style, while using characters with the physical abilities being close to equal, and the physical abilities being the ones which are altered by game perks. This is also not a video comparing the differences between Call of Duty and Battlefield to decide which is better. They are two completely different game titles with very different play styles, which should not be compared in such a way. I am here simply to talk about how I feel developers should start looking at things as they begin to come up with more titles. I'll start off with Call of Duty 4 since it was the first game released of the games I'm going to talk about in this video. Call of Duty 4 was a great game. It was nicely balanced and very competitive, with the need for a good amount of skill for the player to consistently come out on top and at sometimes carry your own team. It had very little need for patches and only had one DLC released, but it still managed to keep people's opinions of it high, and their attention span lasted for a good 2 years on it. It was mostly the fact that people were playing it for that long that they became ready to simply move on to the next game. The setup of the game was very basic. You had the main weapons with a couple possible attachments and 3 perks. But unlike the later releases, the perks of Call of Duty 4 only had a slight effect on their targeted ability, making it so no matter what perk combination you had, your character was still close to the same abilities as the enemy team. This made it so it required more on your part to come out on top, with a few exceptions like Martyrdom and Last Stand, which only rewarded you for committing a failure in your own tactics. To me, the main thing that stands out about Call of Duty 4 is the weapons. There weren't that many weapons, but each one had its own certain feel behind it, and yet a skilled player can still use the weakest weapon in the game and easily kill people. Also, it was possible to get such a feel for the weapons that you can tell when it was about to kill someone. And you can actually stop shooting before that last kill shot has even hit them yet and know they were going to be finished off by it, which is something you simply don't see in games now anymore. The weapons themselves also kill people pretty quickly, which forces the player to have better reaction time when you get shot, plus faster accuracy when you're shooting at people, if you want to drop them quick enough. The equipment perks in the game were also just a slight help to the users, and by no means overpowered. The RPGs were unpredictable in their flight path, making them unable to be heavily abused, and the claymores were easy to see without good placement, and once triggered, it gave the player plenty of time to avoid them if they have good enough reflexes by simply jumping over them. Call of Duty 4 also had the simple feature of weapon camos, which is actually the first game I've played with this feature, and I felt it was great they were able to be unlocked with headshot count. But because of this, the 1 vs 1 player game mode cage match was completely destroyed by the massive number of boosters, unwilling to play the actual game and just boost their headshots to get the challenges completed instead of doing them legit. And that was just garbage. They should have made it so the headshots didn't count in cage matches. That would have ended the boosting overnight for that game mode. The kill streaks in Call of Duty 4 were also very simple. They were controlled by the AI, they were not overpowered, and they were pretty easy to avoid. Plus the choppers had a habit of flying so low that it made them pretty easily destroyed. And you were also only able to use one at a time, which prevents them from being spammed and causes the player to work on the objective more on their own than with the support of kill streaks to do most of the work for them. But next to the weapons, I feel it was the map design of Call of Duty 4 which allowed it to have a real competitive nature behind it. There was almost no camping spots in the game where there was not a sneaky alternative route to access the place where they were camping. This made good knowledge of the map and awareness of the map pretty much a necessity to pull off clutches and carry your teams. And the texturing of the maps themselves made it difficult for people to hide. I mean, you can see a sniper with a ghillie suit laying in the grass across the map easily, just from the difference in the texturing on their bodies in the map. And that puts the campers at a real disadvantage and forces them to be more active pretty much, unless they want to get a massive death streak. And then Modern Warfare 2 came onto the scene, and for a while everyone began to pretty much praise the gods being the god of hooters, god of protein, and Gur from Invader Zim. Anyway, at first people loved the game, and a certain group of people still do, just from the way it was designed. But the main issue, or overall issue with Modern Warfare 2, was just that it was so crammed full of class elements. For example, would be the perk for secondary equipment, which was slot 1 in Call of Duty 4. Now it became possible to be used as a secondary weapon. And for the slot 1, they essentially gave you 2 more perks that can be equipped at any given time. And mix that with the possibility to have shotguns as a secondary weapon, it allowed for people to get the kills even easier during each life, and in turn make the kill streaks come even easier, which I'll get into soon on its own. For competitive play though, this became a problem because there was just so many combinations, it became impossible to anticipate what you're going to come up against during a gunfight with any given person. Modern Warfare 2 also doubled the number of perks your characters could have equipped, with each given their effect at a much larger rate than they did in Call of Duty 4. For example, the Marathon now gave you unlimited sprint, versus in Call of Duty 4, the extreme conditioning only gave you a few more seconds of sprint, and you still had the rest period that came afterwards. This made the physical ability between the characters of each person very different with the possible combinations, which leads to battles being resulted with the winners being the person who had the better class setup for that situation. But in addition to those normal perks, they added in the death streak feature, which did nothing but reward the person for having their butts kicked for a bit, which I find ridiculous. But on the other hand, they gave you the option to swap out the frag grenade for either a thrower knife, a Simtex, or a single claymore. This I saw as a good thing because you're actually giving up something to get something of equal power, and each piece or each device had a very different style of using it. This allowed you to choose what best fit for you, but it kept that problem of having the inability to anticipate what you're going to come up against. Like, you could come around a corner and start shooting someone, and all of a sudden you got a throwing knife in the face because you had no way of knowing that they were going to have a throwing knife. And again, this made the battles result on who had the better class setup for that current situation rather than the need for actual skill level. Now, the Modern Warfare 2 weapons were still pretty strong, but they start to lose that sense of when they're going to kill someone, making it bring that style of just keep shooting until they drop kind of play. And mix that with the fact that the guns began to feel pretty similar to each other and what the developers started to call weapon balancing, which started to develop a very dry feel for the weapon selection. Yeah, Call of Duty 4 had nice weapon balancing. It was a good amount of variety between each weapon, and every gun was still effective on its own, depending on how you used it. But for the infantry aspect of the game, the biggest issue will be how simple and popular the quickscoping became. It got to the point where in any room you went into, literally half or more of the people would just be quickscoping. It made it impossible to have just a normal round without either getting one hit killed before you can even shoot, or getting easy kills because the person couldn't manage to aim. This became all the more reinforced by the fact that the maps were now designed to be more like shooting galleries instead of competitive boards. where there were barely any clever routes you can use to sneak up on campers, and the texture in itself allowed for your characters to insanely easily blend into the map without even trying, making camping all the more stronger. But the biggest problem with Modern Warfare 2 was the kill streaks. By far the biggest problem. They were far too powerful and easy to get. And it just wasn't right that you can complete half the objective from just kill streak kills alone. And let's not forget the massively abused combination of the Harrier, chopper gunner, and nuke, where all you needed to get was that first 7 kills, and then just finish off the round with only kill streak kills, while hiding in some safe corner. Not to mention, just one kill streak like the Harrier or AC-130 can possibly alter the entire flow of the game on its own. Basically, the kill streak setup in Modern Warfare 2 required very little support and skill of the players behind it. And I won't be going into Modern Warfare 3 in this video, since it's virtually a carbon copy of Modern Warfare 2, with the emphasis on more spamming the weapon to actually drop someone. And I feel the developers only changed just enough for the game to be able to call it a new game. Call of Duty 4 lasted us a good 2 years, but like I said before, by then we were just simply ready to move on to something new. And that's when Modern Warfare 2 came out. But that game only lasted us a year with all of its DLC, until pretty much people were fed up with it and ready to jump all over Black Ops. But a lot of people felt Black Ops was also a failure, and I agree, it didn't have the same competitive level that Call of Duty 4 had, but I feel its design was a bit better than what Modern Warfare 2 had given us. Pretty much everything that made Modern Warfare 2 easy mode and noob friendly was nerfed down in Black Ops. And it was likely that group of people who abused those features in Modern Warfare 2 are the ones who started the rant about Black Ops from the start. Now, the map design in Black Ops did bring back tactics and flanking more into the mix, but there was still a bunch of problematic choke points throughout the game where people were prone to sit and wait for the enemies to pop in. But the overall strength of camping was reduced again because the texture of the map made it once again easier to see the people who were just pretty much sitting around. Treyarch also removed the ability of classes to have the shotgun as their default secondary weapon, forcing the people to rely more on their primary weapons. But the part where each class still essentially had 6 perks was still something that needed to be addressed, and the developers should really go back to the 3 perk setup with only subtle changes to their affected ability. And I know I keep repeating that, but like I said, the more equal the players are in terms of physical ability, the more it relies on your skill level to come out on top. Black Ops did, however, reorganize the perks in each slot in a manner that was different than in the previous games. And examples like that being sleight of hand and steady aim are now in the same perk slot, preventing you from equipping both and easily having fast hipfire spam with fast clip reloads. Or putting Flak Jacket in the same slot as Ghost, forcing the stealth players to be more careful about what corners they go around and running into those nasty claymores. The equipment slot was no major issue in Black Ops though, but it did at times affect your ability to anticipate what was going on. For example, it was impossible to predict that a camper you were sneaking up on may have a motion sensor in his feet that was giving you away, and it was just bad luck when that became the situation. And when something depends on luck, that takes away from the use of skill level, only to be replaced by hardware from someone you otherwise would have eliminated. Another example was that the claymores had become quite vicious in Black Ops. They were able to be put into a class now without replacing anything significant as in the previous games. They were now harder to see and did not give you the time to react and get out of the way once they were triggered, making Flak Jacket an extremely useful perk for the rushers in the game, and me being one of those. I kind of liked the Flak Jacket, but it did take away from that ability of being cautious of what corners you went around. Now, the weapons in the game did once again have a nice variety back behind them, while keeping the balance in the game, but it was still the annoyance of not being able to sense on when they were about to die, keeping us at that just shoot until they are dead style. and making us frustrated when we feel like we've hit them plenty, but they're still running. In Black Ops, they also addressed the quickscoping issue, and once again made it more difficult to pull off. Pretty much ending the abuse of that playstyle overnight and ticking off a lot of people who weren't that good at it, but were still able to pull it off in Modern Warfare 2 from how easily you could do it from that game setup. But on the downside to the weapon system was how powerful they made the flinch of the characters when you got hit. Sometimes it would really mess up your shots, leaving the outcomes of the fight down to luck on who managed to get the more hits on the other guy first, through all the uncontrollable jumping of your screen, or the luck of which one of the people has the perk on that strongly reduces the effect of the flinch, making that situation result in the winner likely being the one with the class setup that was made for that situation. And yes, a highly skilled player can still work through that most of the time, but it will easily result in a much closer call and put that skilled player at a very bad stand-in for the next gunfight he might get pulled into a few minutes later, or a few moments later I should say. And the kill streaks in Black Ops were still quite powerful and could accomplish much of the work for the team, and in some cases they were just as easy to acquire. For example, the RC car was pretty much like a Predator missile, and it could be required at 3 kills instead of 5. But it was changes like it was harder to use and could be destroyed that made it better, but it was also capable of going inside, so it can reach more places than a Predator missile could have. The air support was still also pretty strong, but they weren't exactly terribly hard to deal with in this game. And with the introduction of SAM turrets and lock-on missiles being able to lock on and reload much faster than Modern Warfare 2, it was not that much trouble taking out an air support vehicle on a team that actually had the intelligence to do so, instead of just running around and letting them get shot. But the best addition into the Call of Duty series, in my opinion, happened in Black Ops, and that would be the features that they added in which had no effect on the outcomes of battles. These will be the features like the player cards, which you can see the stats on any players in a massive amount of detail, and even watch any of their recent rounds, or even save some of your own clips, which people loved, and I doubt they're ever going to get rid of that, which they shouldn't, because it is an awesome feature. Then there was also the option to personalize your account with your own emblem that can also be decaled onto your own weapon, which is sweet. You can also equip your character with face paint, which on its own lets you identify an enemy person a lot easier, and also somewhat encourages competition between certain players inside a round as an easy way to identify the person as your nemesis or something like that. I use nemesis because I've been playing Battlefield lately. That's just the word I'm used to now.
That's how it's done.
But the biggest thing was the addition of the COD points into the Black Ops system. And that lets you choose which unlocks you got. And with the combination of the wager mode, it pretty much eliminated the problem of people boosting in order to get their weapon unlocks. And it is changes like that that make the game more enjoyable without actually changing the way the games are played. Now, ever since I started playing the Battlefield series back on PlayStation 2, it has remained pretty consistent on what it gives us and what we should expect from it. So I'm only going to talk about what's going on with Battlefield 3 in my mind. Although I will mention that I am pretty troubled and wondering why they would remove features we've seen in Bad Company 2, such as the list of everyone we have taken dog tags from in the game and how many times we've gotten them. Or the slightly more user-friendly layout of the menu pages. And one thing I will compare between the two game titles is that the Call of Duty series has Battlefield beat in the loading times for its menus and games. Now, the loading for the rounds is a bit more understandable due to the fact that the maps are much larger in Battlefield and have the vehicles to load in as well. But having to sit through the logos and details of the developers every time you start the game does get pretty old fast. And that fact is tortured upon us every time our game freezes, which it is prone to do a lot, especially on maps like Sea and Crossing, and can happen randomly and at a moment's notice for any reason. making us sit through the load-in all over again just to get back into the game we were already playing in. The Battlefield games are perfect for the solo gamer and for chilling with your friends. It is also great for people who just like completing challenges, since there really is no shortage of ribbons, medals, assignments, or dog tags to unlock, or in my case collect from those who have unlocked them from knifing them. Battlefield though is a game that encourages the use of teamwork to win, and if you manage to get a good team together, it is very easy to push the enemy team back into their base. But the problem is that on its own can make the round turn dull pretty quickly, as you just sit and wait for them to come out of their base. And most of the time they'll just switch to sniper and stay in the back of their base. Or even cause half their team to quit out most of the time. But as most of us who have played the game before probably quickly realize that unless you know most of the players on your team, it's not likely you're going to be working together as a team and just instead going off and doing your own thing. And in some cases that thing is being a waste of a player slot and being completely useless. Which brings me back to the sniping back in the main base. Because that just doesn't help your team at all. It doesn't even help your team break out of the spawn trap, because that just leaves a few of you to get out. But I feel the Battlefield did the perk system right in terms that you can only equip one perk for yourself, and that perk can also help out the rest of your squad. And if you have coordinated with your squad members, you can get additional perks. But it isn't even that big of a disadvantage not to have 4 perks on at one time. And it's gotten to the point where most people don't even think twice about being in a squad with just only 2 people. The vehicle aspect of the Battlefield series has always kept it going nice and strong though. They kept the game going fresh because of it, and it gives you more options in how you want to approach the objectives. And each vehicle takes its own little certain skill level and experience to use effectively. The vehicles do change the game flow quite often though, and even force a bunch of people to abandon the defense of an objective due to the fact that some classes, such as Recon and Assault, have no effective means of dealing with a vehicle on their own. But it does force people to think quickly and to be capable of changing their tactics pretty quickly. But the major problem with some vehicles is that sometimes there's just too many people that want them, and they will leave their team hanging just to sit back in the main base and wait for their vehicles to spawn into the round. In my opinion, the greatest issue against competitive play in Battlefield 3 will be the weapon system. The game seems to be very inconsistent with the damage dealt by the weapons, and has had serious issues with hit detection of the rounds. This causes massive spam on the weapons, and at times can force someone to use half their clip or more to take down just one person, making encounters against 2 or more people turn into pretty sticky situations. And let's not forget when we are left with those WTF moments when you get like 7 hit markers on one guy and then die in what seems to be like 2 bullets. And then notice that the guy is literally at 0% health when we see their tags up on our screen. The most skill promoting element in the Battlefield series, I would say, is the bullet drop and travel time distance of the bullets. It forces players, especially the snipers, to feel out their shots more before taking them instead of just pointing and shooting at any range. But on the flip side, the suppression element of the game, I feel, is a complete failure. Blurring out the player's vision and making their weapon more inaccurate does nothing but make the outcome of the gunfights depend more on luck and spam instead of skill and accuracy. And add in the fact that the weapons now have extended mags and the possible laser sight attachment to increase hip fire accuracy. The developers are just begging for the players to spam higher fire rate large mag weapons from the hip without even having to take the need to aim in your gun. But it is not only the hip spammers that chew out the fun gunfights, but it's also the spamming of high damage rounds. I feel it has no place in the competitive first person shooter games. This would be the weapons like the semi-automatic sniper rifles like the SKS or the M417, which we were always seeing people just running around with red dot sights, dropping people in like 3 to 4 hits while eating half a clip of the normal weapons from the ones that you're shooting. And even worse than that is the semi-automatic shotguns, which only takes ballpark hipfire aim to spam at a group of people and wipe out all of them easily. And stuff that takes no aim or precision like that just eats away at the people who do have the skill of aiming and precision. And that just doesn't seem right in my opinion. The best thing about Battlefield 3 is the number of patches the developers have released to try to fix bugs, glitches, and other issues with the game though. Some of the changes they did were very needed, such as fixing the MAV glitch and the dart glitch. But other adjustments they have made are just annoying and require players to readjust to the game. In some cases, change their entire style of playing, like when they make it so flares no longer break the enemy locks, it forces pilots to come up with entirely new tactics of dealing with choppers if you're in a chopper, or even fighting against choppers with your jet. And it forces jet pilots to wait until a missile is incoming before you should pop your flares, which on its own can be an issue since there is a time delay between when the missile is actually fired and when the game warns you that there is an incoming missile. And mix that with the issue that sometimes the flares will be completely ignored by the missile for no reason. This results in a lot of irritating disables that should not have happened. But there are still bugs that needed to be fixed that we have had no news about, and even little bugs like the co-op dog tags being unable to be unlocked, which seems like should be an easy fix, but apparently it isn't. And personally, with me being a heavy knifer, the most irritating bug of all being when you come up behind someone and your knife refuses to attack the guy, often leading to the death of an enemy team member by the person you're trying to knife, or causing my own tags to be taken because my knife is refusing to grab the guy in front of me, making me protected for that short time. And while other aspects of the knife system, like the cooldown effect, there are people trying to get rid of that. And I feel that needs to stay in the game because it does more than prevent you from knifing someone else right away after you finish knifing someone. But it also prevents you from being knifed right as soon as you're finished knifing someone. Because plenty of times people will come up behind you as you're doing a knife takedown and waiting for you to finish before they try grabbing your tags. And that would be just obnoxious to have your tags taken when you have no chance of moving or defending them. Which is something that is now possible with the revival system, being that you can revive a teammate and they can have their tags taken instantly without any chance of declining the revive. And that's just something I find to be ridiculous, as it's likely the result of people complaining that they're not getting easy kills on people that have just been revived. Overall, I feel that the developers need to quit listening to all the complainers in the game and simply look to their past games to see what made them a success. If a game series like Call of Duty were to go back to its Call of Duty 4 design, there would be a bunch of ticked off people who will miss all their perks and kill streaks, but the relatively simple design of the game will bring back the competitive nature and just really bring more fun back into the mix. Because the closer the characters are to being forced to using the same thing, the more is required of the player behind it to get the win for it. To me, the ideal competitive first-person shooter game will be a game with the vehicle system and map design of Battlefield 3, the infantry design, the weapons, and appearance of Call of Duty 4, the menu setup and loading speed of Modern Warfare 3, with the profile customization and features that don't affect battle results, which we find in Black Ops. I mean, to me, that sounds like a fun game that would be highly competitive and wouldn't have much to be abused. I mean, yes, there is going to be stuff that is abused in every single game. But the question is, can the skilled players counter that using their own personal styles? And that's just something I really hope comes back into these first-person shooter games, as the way they're going right now, I just don't see them being competitive anymore, and that's just something that makes me want to stop playing them.